Hey, I'm Hunt, and this is Hunt on LSU, your channel for LSU Fighting Tiger football talk. Enjoy the video. We want you to leave a comment below, hit that like button, and subscribe right below the video. Enjoy. A talking point that is going to gather some attention is year two of Brian Kelly versus year two of Billy Napier, because LSU and Florida both came open at the end of 2021. Dan Mullen was ousted at Florida. Ed Ogeron was ousted at LSU. And both of those teams jumped into the coaching market. Now, LSU had a quote-unquote head start there. They fired Ed Ogeron mid-season. Dan Mullen was fired at the end there in Gainesville. And Florida moved very quickly. And they hired Billy Napier. And LSU hired Brian Kelly kind of it was a very fascinating coaching search from the outside because there were so many differing opinions and rumors and this and that and Lincoln Riley this and Mel Tucker that, and all of a sudden, boom, Brian Kelly is named head coach at LSU. And so the natural thing for everyone to do is to go, well, Florida and LSU are rivals. They play each other every year. And as far as we knew at that point, that was going to continue. We don't know that now, but we did at that time. They're both national championship caliber programs over the course of the last 30 years, multi-time national championship programs, which is rare in this sport. They're in the same conference. This is a very, very easy comparison. We'll decide who hired the best coach. And if you look up, Billy Napier in year one went 6-6 and then lost the bowl games to go to 6-7. They got annihilated by Oregon State out in Vegas, 30-3. So it was a 6-7 first year. They beat Utah, which was a nice win in the Swamp. They played Tennessee in Knoxville to a 38-33 game, and by the time you looked up in the middle of, in early November, that was a great effort by Florida. He developed Anthony Richardson into a first-round quarterback, but the stain of 6-7 with the loss to Vanderbilt is not a great start. But I think there was a lot of understanding that, hey, Dan Mullen, really good play caller, developed the heck out of Kyle Trask, won some games there, but the recruiting, not so great. Billy may need to have some time to recruit and develop. And if you look at what Billy Napier put into the SEC last year from Louisiana Lafayette, you talk about Osiris Torrance at Florida, who was an All-American type player and a draft pick. You talk about the Montreal Johnson, the running back, who had a great year last year. Kyron Lacey here at LSU, Mekhi Gardner here at LSU. Like, those are SEC-level players and likely at some point NFL players that he had at Louisiana Lafayette. That's recruiting and development. We'll see what he can do in Gainesville. So he signs the number 13 class in the country, signs 20 players in that first class. And then in year two, we sit here at the beginning and now middle of November, and he's 5-4. Got smoked by Utah, 24-11. Smoked by Kentucky, 33-14. Smoked by Georgia, 43-20. Then last week, Arkansas fires their offensive coordinator because they can't score. They score 3 points at home against Mississippi State, who also stinks. And Arkansas goes down there and beats Florida in overtime. And, oh, by the way, rolls up nearly 40 points in doing so. Not great. They did beat Tennessee. That's a nice win at home. And it feels like the last three games, while very difficult for Florida, at LSU, at Missouri, home Florida State, that's a very difficult stretch. It also affords some opportunity. What if they win two of those last three? What if they, theoretically come to Baton Rouge and win and then beat Florida State, an undefeated Florida State, in the Swamp? Like, that would change the way you feel 3 weeks from now than you do right now. And then right now, as we kind of thought Billy Napier might do, he's got the number 3 recruiting class in the country committed for this early signing period that we'll have in a couple of weeks. Now, if they lose all three of these games, Jaden Daniels comes back, LSU hangs 42 on them and beats them by 20 points. They go up to Columbia, Missouri, and they're non-competitive there. And their arch rival comes into the Swamp in what won't be likely a great environment at that point. And there may be some dissenting opinions, we'll just say, inside the Swamp should that happen. Maybe this class doesn't look quite as good as it does on paper right now. But thus far, you were 6-7 last year, and you're 5-4 now. That's 11-11. With 3 really tough games coming up. 11-14, possible. And Florida doesn't have a lot of patience. They expect it to look like Spurrier had it cooking in the 90s. They expect it to look like Meyer had it in the mid-2000s. That's what they expect there. They didn't care that Will Muschamp got him to a Sugar Bowl. It was ugly. They didn't care that Jim McElwain won the East twice. It was ugly, and they didn't compete when they got in there. They didn't care that Dan Mullen got to Atlanta and had a Heisman Trophy theoretical frontrunner into December in 2020 until LSU went in there and won. They didn't win enough. And when they get cranky in Gainesville, they don't show up. So you're teetering there. And the comparison, as I brought up at the beginning, is what has Brian Kelly done? And we went through that yesterday. It's like, okay, well, last year you beat Bama and won the West. That's a phenomenal start. This year you've got a high-powered offense that looks really good on paper and in person. But what's the defensive issues? And then what does this year finish like? And truth be told, I go through that 7 minutes with you of talking about the resumes through 2 years, and it's not even through 2 years. We really don't know exactly where these two programs are. There are so many variables over the next 4 months between the last 3 games of the season, which are huge for LSU, huge for Florida, and then the most important thing, the recruiting and the transfer portal. Because whether or not you go to the Liberty Bowl or the Belt Bowl or the Birmingham Bowl or the Texas Bowl, to these two programs is immaterial. When can you win championships? And so that comparison comes up. And by now, if you'll listen to the show with any regularity and have a feel for the way that I operate and the way I feel about this specific issue, you know I don't give a rip what Billy Napier does in comparison to Brian Kelly. I only care what Brian Kelly does. If Brian Kelly never wins the West again, averages 9 wins a year, doesn't get to the college football playoff, but beats Bama every once in a while, and never wins a national championship, but Billy Napier gets fired after year 3 with an under 500 record, I won't go, we got the right guy, nailed it, thank goodness we avoided Billy. That's not how that goes. I would just say, man, that's a disappointing run for Brian Kelly. In the same vein, if Brian Kelly wins the national championship next year, and then Billy Napier wins the next 2, but Brian Kelly's got LSU in the college football playoff, I'm not going to go, well, we screwed up. We could have had Napier. There's 2 championships. I've only got 1. I wouldn't think of it that way either. The standard is the standard at LSU. It's the same comment that I talked about when we were talking about, well, how much money is Brian Kelly relative to how many wins he has? It doesn't matter about the money. It matters about the wins. You don't have a lower expectation at LSU. If you make $1.5 million, you don't have a higher expectation in my mind if you make 11. The expectation at LSU is the expectation. And that doesn't factor in what Florida does just because they were hiring a coach the same time as us. I was on record, on this show, on the air. I'd hire Billy Napier. That's the guy I think should be the next coach at LSU. May have been wrong, may have been right. At this point, it doesn't look great in Gainesville. But I think Brian Kelly's got a chance to do a really good job, and that's irrelevant to what's going on in Gainesville. That's just my opinion. Now, what is relevant with Billy Napier in Gainesville is something we do have to concern ourselves with here in Baton Rouge, and that's Billy Napier recruiting the state of Louisiana. Billy Napier was on the SEC teleconference today, and he was asked about coming back to Louisiana and what that means to him.
Our time in Louisiana was fantastic. You know, I think really appreciative of the people in Acadiana and Lafayette, for the, just first-class experience, for not only myself but our family as well. My wife, Allie, and our kids really enjoyed our time there. One of the reasons why we stayed there for as long as we did. And I think anytime you go back to your home state, there's an element of that, that is significant, right? And I know our guys will be excited But look, we play in the SEC. Every week presents a great opportunity. There's always some challenges to each opponent that we play. This is going to be a great opportunity for this team and some of the individual players on our team.
He has deep roots in Louisiana because of that time at Louisiana Lafayette and because of his time recruiting the state when he was on staff with Nick Saban in Alabama. And you already know that Jabbar Jalouk and Corey Raymond have spent a ton of time here. That's a focus for them in recruiting. Not the focus. They got a pretty fertile state to go get some players from themselves. However, they are going to show up here. I don't know that Dan Mullen was coming to Louisiana very often. I don't know if that was a priority for him. Obviously, he did recruit at Mississippi State. He's familiar with it, but Billy Napier is coming in here to get players, and he did, to this point, one this year. Wardell Mack from down there in New Orleans, who plays cornerback. If you hadn't noticed, LSU could use some good cornerbacks. So I don't care about the resume of Billy Napier and Brian Kelly at their current stops when you speak about comparisons. All I care about is Brian Kelly's. But I'll start caring about Billy Napier more if he continues to show up in this state and pull players that LSU wants and needs to pull in. Hey, thanks for watching Hunt on LSU. Before you get out of here, do us a couple of favors. Hit that like button, leave your comments below, and subscribe to the channel for all your Fighting Tiger football talk. See you next time.